The meeting is starting.
Oh my God, I'm Lindsay too.
Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the lesson. We've got me, Sarah Longson, and Brandon Clarke, International Master, and we're going to be doing some positional chess with you today. So it's not tactics, it's positional chess, which people tend to find a bit more boring than normal chess, but it is actually very important if you want to get better as a chess player. So this is going to be a really valuable lesson. Brandon is an expert in these types of positions, and he's going to lead the way. If you want to talk, please talk in the chat. We'll ask you questions as we go through, and we want you to privately message us your answers so that you're not giving it away for the class. And Brandon likes to put a countdown timer on when he's doing the questions. So you'll be racing against the clock, but it should be good fun. And all the material that we covered today, I can see it there now, will be sent out to you. So you're going to have a good time, and hopefully you'll improve your positional chess. So I'll hand you over to Brandon for the introductions, and we'll get going.
All right, thank you very much, Sarah. It's good to be with you all today on this very exciting topic. So mostly what we're going to focus on is the outpost, the open file, and the rank, right? These are all very important elements that contribute towards positional play. Now, they're things you guys have probably heard of before, but maybe not quite understand exactly what's going on with those. So we've got plenty of examples to get through, lots of fun and exciting questions, so you guys can test your knowledge against the my study that I've created here. Okay, so the first we're going to start off with is this open file, and it's important to get the definition right, because most of you will know that the open file is just like this, right? Where there are no pawns for either side on that file, and then the rooks, the heavy pieces, rooks or queens, are very, very happy, and they're going to have a long range of attack. But it actually goes a little bit further than that. So we see here this rook. This is what we would call a half open file or a semi-open file, right? And usually people kind of just stop at that moment. They go, yep, it's semi-open, then they move on, right? But actually, we've got to go a little bit further and understand that just because it's semi-open, it means it's like open for one side and closed for the other, right? It's important to kind of make that distinction. So here we can say that it's closed for black, because imagine if black had a rook on b8, he's staring at his own pawn, so he's not going to be particularly very happy about that. Whereas the white rook is very, very excited because he's got no one in his way, and he's eyeing up that juicy black pawn. And so he's, very happy. So we look at the other ones. This rook would be considered open for white. It'd be closed for black, right? And this one is interesting as well, because even though white has a pawn here, usually this would be closed for white as well, but he's managed to somehow get his rook over in front of the pawn. And that now means that this is now kind of open file for white, but again, still closed for black, okay? What about this one? Let's see, you guys, maybe it's a good question for you guys to answer in the chat. Is this an open file for white or not?
Remember, an open file is when there's no pawns on the file.
Mm-hmm.
Half open is when there are pawns on the file. One pawn. Yeah.
And if it's a half open, we want to know then who is it open for? Is it open for white or for black?
Okay, you can ask.
All right, so we've got some half opens, closed for black, closed for white. no idea. All right, well, that's good then. I mean, you can get this all cleared up. Okay, perfect. So, yeah, so some of you have been saying closed for white. Some are saying open for black or closed for black. Yeah, so it's definitely going to be closed for white, because white's the one looking at his own pawn, right? So that way the queen is not very effective at all. If the black has a heavy piece on the d file, it would be considered open for black, right? So this is just a semi-open file, closed for white, open for black. Okay, hopefully that all makes sense. Okay, so open files, of course, extremely important, because they're the things that your heavy pieces want to be able to utilize. So the whole purpose of being able to have an open file is actually this ability to penetrate into your opponent's half of the board, right? If you can't do that and they've like kind of defended all of the entry points, then it's not really much point, right, having that open file. So we really want to use the rook or the queen to get in on the 7th or 8th ranks, and that way we can utilize the open file. So let's have a look at this next one.
Yeah, the rooks and queens, they absolutely love open files. It's a great example.
Yeah. Okay, so let's give you guys some time to answer this question. It's white to move. What do you think white should do here to utilize one of the open files?
If you answer privately in the chat, don't put the message to everyone, please. And the full variation if you can. If you can't go that far, give us the first move.
Don't reveal your secrets.
Oh, I'd love to have this position with white. I'm not
Me too.
Oh, William's given a fantastic answer. So you're racing against the clock because Brandon's put the timer on. If you're struggling, just go for the first move. See if you can get your heavy piece, which is your queen, onto an open file where there's no pawns. What does utilize mean? That's a good question. Well, that's
William gave a good definition. Just make use.
Ah, excellent. Better than I could do.
William's our Oxford Dictionary for today.
Excellent.
All right, time is running out. So we all got an answer? Okay, so we've got a few different suggestions. We've got some going queen to d1 using the open file there. Someone is going queen to h1. And these seem like the two main options that have been given. Okay, fantastic. So both of them are good suggestions. Queen d1 is not so bad because at least you have a square you can try and get into. But the problem, I guess, is it's a little bit slow. And so let's say you go queen d1. You've always got to keep in mind that even though your threat might be to go queen d7, that they have a chance to stop you, right? So let's say let's go queen to c7. All of a sudden, all of these like entry points into the black position are defended, right? This is an example where the open file is not really too relevant. So we want to try and find a better square we can go with the queen where we force entry into the black's position. So the right answer is to go queen to h1. So well done for those that got that. We put the king in check, so this is a forcing sequence. So he has to move away. Okay, we can't quite get in on the 8th rank. Otherwise that king can come back and squash us. So you gotta be careful. Don't let him do that. Queen h7 check. King has to run.
Now a nice skewer.
Now we go there. Yep, that's right. Sarah's got the good old skewer going. Queen check, king to e7. And I know this pawn might look very tasty, but I mean, there's a better prize over here. So hopefully you guys saw that we can get the queen, right? So this is a perfect example of how to utilize that open file to get into the black position and then win his most valuable pieces, right? Pretty brutal. Okay, let's give that another go then. So we've got another position here. It's white to play. Look for the open files, the half open files, right? And let's see if you guys can come up with a good solution for white. White to move, you're going to have another minute.
And then always look for checks, catches, and threats. It's always a good starting point in chess. In any
exactly. And make sure you can force your way through on the open file, right? Don't make a move if they can defend the entry point, then maybe your move isn't working. Charlie's got it.
Excellent, Charlie. Yeah, look for those forcing moves that force black to do something about it. Otherwise, it could get defeated.
A few people have got it now. Yep.
Yeah, I've seen correct answers from Charlie, Gonzalo. If you see a good move, look for a better move. That's a nice saying in chess. So really look for the best way, because we could actually get checkmate here if we play accurately.
Okay, all right, so we've got quite a few suggestions. Again, most popular ones were rook to d1 and rook to over to kind of h1. basically, yeah, those sort of ideas. Someone also suggested rook to e1. Okay, so we'll start with this one. Rook to e1. The issue, I guess, is you're not really threatening to get into their position because the knight is acting as a blockade, right? So you can't get into the 7th and the 8th squares. So that's not so good. Rook to d1 looks interesting because you're trying to go rook to d7 on the 7th rank. But again, I guess black can just go like rook c7, and then you're denied entry into those key 7th and 8th squares. Rook to h1 is also not bad because at least you're attacking Harry over here. But the problem is you give black some time because it's not a forcing move. Black has some time to go back knight f8 and maybe to hold on and survive. So this is why Sarah mentioned that it's always good that when you're in a position of kind of you're looking for some tactic, you need to always be looking for the checks and the captures first, right? And maybe change the order a little bit as well. Because if you first look at this rook h1, knight f8, it's not working, right? And so now we have to change the order and say, okay, how about we start with this move, which looks a bit crazy. We take Harry, king goes over there and says, oh, thank you very much. Now the rook comes over. It's become a completely open file, right? Check. King has to go back to g8. And now hopefully you can all see the finish. Rook goes all the way up to h8 with a checkmate. Okay, I think someone also mentioned back here that maybe they can go king to f8 and try to run, but actually my bishop is controlling the escape square. So if you try to run, I can still go rook h8, checkmate. So I think that's what they meant, maybe.
Yeah, it doesn't that bishop's very powerful on f6, controlling the dark squares.
Yeah, so rook takes h7, there's actually no way to prevent the mate. So black is completely lost here. Okay, fantastic. So next position here is a game from Alekline, who was a very, very strong player, back from 1925. Sounds like forever ago. So here white plays this move, knight takes d4, and we now have a 50-50 decision. We can take with the pawn or with the bishop. So over to you guys again. Time is going to start ticking. You have to decide which move do you think is better.
Have a guess if you're not sure. I'd like to have an answer from everyone, please. I want to be taking part. If you're not sure,
easy one. 50% chance of getting it right.
Yes, even if you're not sure, just have a guess.
Someone said d4. D4, they're both going to d4, so that's technically correct, but I need to know which piece is going there, you know?
Oh, I should have. I'll start adding up the variety. We've got lots of bishop, lots of pawns.
Yeah, it's interesting to see.
Yeah, what would you play?
Okay, so we've got a pretty much equal answers, I think. There wasn't really that one was more popular than the other, I think. Yeah, it's mostly pretty similar. So first off, I think both moves look pretty okay. So it's not really a big difference between them. So if you played bishop takes d4, yeah, not necessarily a bad move. But I guess it allows white time to go like knight takes d5, queen takes d5, bishop to f3, queen comes back, bishop takes, queen takes, and maybe it's queen e4. And after this kind of sequence, it seems like black has no advantage whatsoever. I think white will be completely fine. He can go c3 next and kick his bishop away, and he shouldn't have any real problems. So the move we're actually after, the move that Alekline played in the game, was pawn takes d4. And the reason for that is he's capturing towards the center, right? And that's always a good rule to remember, that if you have a choice, try to capture towards the center, because that way you have more pawns there, right? Which is never a bad thing. And we can see straight away by this nice red arrow that the c2 pawn is now become a backward pawn, right? Which is usually a weakness. And so this is something that white's always got to try and defend, which is not going to be particularly pleasant. So let's look at the same. Let's say white played the same moves. He took bishop f3, queen back, bishop takes, queen takes. Now we can see the difference in the position. that this pawn on c2 is that backward pawn, and we can easily target that with our heavy pieces, right? So remember, whenever we're dealing with a backward pawn on the file, you want to attack it with your heavy pieces, right? Rooks and queen, okay? Not necessarily your minor pieces. The reason for that is you attack with a minor piece. Let's say I've got a bishop over here saying hello. The pawn can always just move out of the way, right? And then the bishop's no longer attacking. So the nice thing about having a rook lined up is the pawn can't really go anywhere unless you can try capture something, which is usually not the case. The pawn will always be in the line of fire of our heavy pieces, so he's not going anywhere. Okay.
I've got a question from Harrison, but the bishop also controls the centre. I think what Brandon's trying to say is that once we've opened the C file, you can just put your heavy pieces on it. So, I mean, with point of positional chess, it's long term. It's not about instantly winning material. But this is a massive long-term advantage because white can't do anything to guard C2. And eventually that's going to fall. So even though the bishop is in the center, it's okay, but this is much better because of the half-open file that black can just exploit. So
yeah, precisely. Fantastic. Okay, so let's go on to the next example then. This is called the Springboard.
Backward pawn is a question in the chat. Would you like to answer that one, or should I?
What's what? A backward pawn?
That's backward pawn, and someone else has said you spelled mobility wrong.
I did.
I don't know. I think on the study. Anyway, backward pawn.
Oh, yeah, I missed out on either. Huh? Very observant. Yeah, actually, that's the problem in the chat room. Once I type things in here, I've got to be very careful because otherwise I can't actually edit it, which is a bit annoying. Yeah, but okay, yeah, the backward pawn. So that's the pawn that is kind of been left behind by his friends. It's not quite the isolated pawn. An isolated pawn is someone that has none of his pawns nearby. So the backward pawn is a guy that's kind of just stuck behind his other one. So you look at this guy here, he's pretty healthy. And this pawn is kind of being forgotten about. And so when we target him like this, he's very difficult to defend because he can't be defended by another pawn. Actually, that's a very key point, right? None of the pawns can defend him. And because we have a pawn on d4, he can't really move forward because we can just take, right? So that's the problem with the backward pawn. Right now to redo my arrows, I think I messed up my, there you go, much better. So I hope that all makes sense.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, thank you. Someone said, is this the game that made the Alpine Scarno? I don't think it was, but Alpine had lots of fantastic games.
Yeah. Okay, so this one is known as the Springboard technique. So here we can see that white has the open file, right? Remember, this is like the semi-open file, right? But we'd say it's closed for black and it's open for white. Since white's the one being the attacker, black is the one being the defender. Okay, so the black rook is passive, the white rook is active, right? Okay. Now, as Sarah mentioned, when you've got these kind of strategic advantages, it's very important that you're not really in a rush because the strategic advantage is kind of a long-term thing. And so you should just be gradually increasing your position, just improving all the time, and then not allowing your opponent to have any counterplay. Because if you find yourself in a position where you are strategically worse, then you're supposed to be reacting dynamically, right? So that's exactly what black should be trying to do, because we can see that white is strategically better. And actually, this is exactly why I kind of laid out these evaluation techniques, where if you can't quite understand who's better, a good thing to do is just to go through these topics and kind of work out which who's better in each category. So for example, if we look at the material aspect, we can say that material is equal. So there's no difference there. King safety, okay, both kings seem quite safe. So again, it's equal. Pawn structure, well, white has one pawn island here, right? And another pawn island over there. So he's got two pawn islands. Black has 1, 2, 3 pawn islands, right?
I'll explain what pawn island is, but I'm not sure if everyone understands that. So, well, do you want to, Brandon, or should I?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So a pawn island's basically like pawns that kind of go together. You know, it's pawns that can defend each other. So this guy is not part of this island because imagine that this is like a big the ocean's there or something, and you can't get across to help out the sea pawn, right? Whereas these guys are kind of connected, right? And so that they're together. right? So this could be like, I don't know, the United Kingdom, and that can be the Isle of Man or something, or island over there. And yeah, but we then need to get on the boat and get across, and it's a little bit more difficult. So that's why this guy is all on his own. These guys are together, and these guys are together, right? Because these guys can't help each other. So that's what a pawn island is. Very important to understand. These guys are all connected. Okay, so that's one island, and these guys are connected. So that's the second island. And remember that when we're dealing with pawn islands, the fewer you have, the better. Right. So here, because white only has 2 pawn islands and black has 3, we can say that white is better in a pawn structural aspect. Right. Also, those that have been kind of keen observers will notice that this is the backward pawn. Right. This is a backward pawn. This is an isolated pawn. And usually, if a pawn has some sort of name, then he might be a bad one. Right. Okay. Piece mobility. So yep, kind of spelled that slightly wrong. Whoops. Luckily, we've got better pieces. We can say that our minor piece, our knight, is better than the bishop because the bishop is being restricted by his own pawns. He doesn't want his pawns to be on the same color as himself, otherwise he can't really move anywhere. And the knight is really well placed in the center where it can attack lots of things. Also, our rook is more active than their rook. So again, we can say that basically the white pieces are better than the black pieces, and therefore white is better in that regard. Okay, space is roughly equal, and threats, okay, it's not really any serious threats, and so we can kind of say that's roughly equal as well. Okay, so when we kind of go back and evaluate, we said this was equal, white was better in structure, and this one. So basically, white was better in these 2 categories, and so that's what allows us to make a conclusion that white is strategically better. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great explanation.
All right, so it's actually white to move. Now it's always important we're aware of our opponent's resources, because if he gets a chance to swap off maybe one of his bad pawns, like an isolated pawn, a backward pawn, something like that, then maybe he improves his position. So white to play. First, you need to identify what black's threat is, and then you'll have a much better chance to find the move. If you do not identify what black's threat is, trying to find this move is not so easy. Okay, so I'll start the timer. Don't rush, have a think.
Don't rush, they've only got a minute.
Plenty of time. You can play a whole bullet game in a minute. All right, Charlie's correctly identified the threat. So now he just needs to, went for the slightly wrong solution though.
Okay, well that's good. It's supposed to be challenging, and I think everyone's going to learn something from this because it's a great example. I mean, Brandon and I would look at this position and the move would just jump out at us because we've seen these types of positions so many times. But if you've not seen them before, then there's no reason why it would jump out at you. So if you get this wrong, don't worry. That's what we're doing today. We're learning. I've had one correct answer through from Joseph and William.
Yep.
Good. Impressed. And Gonzalo as well. Well, I think that was your second attempt.
Okay, so all right, so we had a few different suggestions. All right, so we have this one, knight takes c6. Now be careful about this move because black has 2 defenders, right? And you only have 1 guy to reinforce your knight. So if you take there, it's actually going to be a bad trade for you. Black can just take that knight. So be careful with that one. What else do we have? So some people are saying rook e8 and bishop e6 might be the potential threat. I'm not sure though, because if you move the rook away, then these guys are kind of tied to this pawn. So if they start running away, maybe white can just take, right? So I'm not sure that's really necessarily a threat. Knight b5 was another suggestion. Now this looks like a clever idea because it looks like this pawn is pinned, but be careful as well, the rook is actually defended. So if you go knight to b5, that pawn would be very happy just to take you. And now this is not really a pin because the bishop can just recapture. Yeah, so knight b5 also doesn't quite work. So actually, yeah, the main threat here is to play a5. It's important to understand then why is that a threat, because it looks a bit harmless, right? But it's not necessarily a dynamic threat when they're trying to win material or give a checkmate, which is probably the sort of threat you guys are more accustomed to. It's more of a strategic threat where what black is saying is he's basically saying this is an isolated pawn. It gives him a third pawn island, which we now know is not a good idea. And he wants to basically exchange his weak pawn off the board. If he can do that, then he's going to be much, a lot happier, right? So let's say white just makes a move like king to f1, black would go a5. And the problem is if we take, then black can go c5 and he gets quite a lot of counterplay, which is, again, that's the whole thing we should be trying to prevent. And if we just leave it there like this, take, now if we look at the pawn structure, white has still the 2 pawn islands, but black also only has 2 pawn islands, right? So it feels as though black has improved his position somewhat. And of course, we shouldn't really be allowing him to do that. Okay. So let's go back. And yeah, the right solution was to go rook to c5. And this way, we not only improve the position of our rook, but we also prevent any of these c5 or a5 pawn breaks. Right? Knight b3 is also suggested, which is not necessarily a bad idea. It's pretty good. You stop those things as well. But the problem is you kind of misplace your knight a little bit to do so. So that's why rook c5 would be a little bit better. Okay. All right. So yeah, basically, whenever you're dealing with strategic positions, very important. Always keep in mind your opponent's pawn breaks. Right, when they're trying to use one of their pawns to attack another one of your pawns, that's what a pawn break is, and it helps them to try free their position. So we've got to always be mindful of that. Okay, hope that all makes sense.
Yeah, I think.
Any questions?
There's a question. What about rook a8? I mean, rook a8 does defend the pawn, but the problem is black's rook is going really bad. So then I'd be looking at maybe rook a6 and furthering. After b5, rook a8, and then rook a6, but black's position is terrible, and in these endgames you need to go back to pieces, and that rook on a8 is not doing a good job. It'll be very easy for white to improve the position further.
Yeah, actually the problem with the rook is that it's tied down to defending this guy, so even after rook c5 we go rook a8, I can just take and now transform my advantage. I've gone from a positional advantage to a material advantage, right? Something that's more like a permanent thing, more something long term. So yeah, this is a big problem for black as well. Okay, so let's move on. All right, and central v flank. Wonderful. Look at this. It's like Disneyland. Disneyland on the chessboard. You guys are like, what on earth is going on here? Like, mind blown. I promise there's a point to this. It's not just me going completely crazy. Actually, it might be a little bit like that, but it's fine. So basically here, what we're trying to understand is this kind of these outposts, right? So we're kind of now trying to connect the dots. So we talked about this kind of open file, and now we're trying to talk about outposts, right? And it's very important to understand that there's a difference between like central outposts and flank outposts. And in order to kind of get that definition, we need to then kind of see what is a flank outpost and what is a central outpost, right? So let's go through and try to dissect what is going on in this crazy diagram. I did kind of make it myself, so that might be why it looks a little bit odd. But anyway, we've got the 4 green central squares is the center, as you guys, I'm sure, know very well. So of course, that's the kind of ideal part to, control. The flank, is the side of the board. And this is, again, important to understand exactly where that is, because I think a lot of chess players assume that it might also be the C and F files as well, because they think that, well, these are central squares, then these guys can go to the center, and then everything else must be kind of the flank, right? But that's not strictly true, because these guys on C and F can also help to challenge the central squares, right? If I go C4, I can attack D5. So let me show you one opening. Let's go D4 and D5. This is the very famous opening, Queen's Gambit, right? Where white is able to use that C pawn to attack the center. And so therefore we can kind of conclude that it shouldn't really be classed as a flank pawn, right? So therefore the flank files would be the B and A, and on the other side, G and H, right? And the whole point is that your minor pieces want to be on the central outposts, and your major pieces want to be on the flank outposts. Okay, so in the center, you want your like knights and bishops want to be in that region, and on the side, you want kind of the rooks, somewhere they can kind of use those outposts as a way to maybe double on that file. So yeah, I know it might look a bit complicated at the moment, but I'm sure it'll start to make sense in just a second. Okay, so let's go on to, yeah, this is all fine. Okay, so let's go on to this one. So this is a pawn structure taken from the Scandinavian Opening. And for those that don't know, plenty of chapters, William, lots of information here. The Scandinavian Open is when white goes pawn to e4, black responds with pawn to d5, and then white takes that pawn. So that's why these guys have disappeared from the board. And the reason I've included this position is because we want to kind of understand where the outposts are for either side, right? Now, traditionally, I think that you guys would kind of think of an outpost as a square that let's say a knight can be on that is not able to be kicked away by a pawn, right? And that's kind of the traditional view on an outpost. I don't think I actually put any of those examples in here. So maybe I can just whip up something real quick. So let's say I had a position like this, and white has a knight on d5, and then we have a black structure like this. Let's put some kings on the board. Let's put some rooks like there and there. That looks good. Bishop can be hiding over there somewhere. It could be here. So something like that. Probably I should put this pawn there so he's not getting attacked. All right. So let's say we've got a position like this. This is kind of like a traditional outpost, right? Where the knight is in that central region, right? Exactly where we want our mine pieces to be, mine piece on the outpost. And yep, you're right, Williams, is taken from Sicilian type of structure. And this is an outpost because black can't kick away the knight with any pawns, right? So its knight is very, very annoying for black to have to deal with. He's in his half of the board, which gives him a lot of scope to start an attack or, attack weaknesses, things like that, right? Now, the other definition for an outpost is actually that even if they did have a pawn here and they could kick you away, that might be fine because it also means that by doing so, we could provoke black to make a weakness, okay? So the easiest way to understand that is to go all the way back up here. And we wanted, was it this one? Yeah, let's look at this one first. So again, from the start, we kind of looked at these open files, right? Semi-open files, and closed files, right? So here we can see that this file is open for white and closed for black, yeah? Remember, it's because the black rook would be hitting his own pawn. The white rook is actually doing an aggressive role, and so that's why he's absolutely happy. And so this one here would be open for the black rook and closed for for the white rook, yeah, because the white rook's hitting his own pawn. Okay. Now d5 would actually be classed as an outpost. It's important to understand then why is that the case, because it looks as though as we go knight d5, he can just play c6, and now the knight is forced away, right? So it looks like we didn't really achieve anything. Now, this is very important point, very good area for you guys to improve upon, because pawn play, which is actually a topic we're going to be covering in the next lesson today, is another very key element to improve your chess. A lot of guys kind of your age are always focused more on tactics and checkmates and all the sharp stuff, all the dynamics, and that's great. But dynamics and strategical play, they kind of go like hand in hand, and you've got to be good at both. If you're not good at both, then it's very hard to become a strong chess player, because they kind of complement each other, right? So what we need to understand here is that if we just simply go rook to d2 and we try to double the rooks against a d pawn, we're basically hitting a brick wall, right? A pawn defended by another pawn is a very strong foundation, and so doubling our rooks, like the pawn would just start laughing at us, right? We go here, we go rook to d1, and he goes, okay, you've got two attackers, I have one defender, go for it, right? He might just move this guy, and then if we try to take, he takes, we take. Even though we got to capture last, we only got 2 pawns, so 2 points, and we lost 5. Not a great trade, right? So that's why this was a big problem. And our open file at the moment is not really very useful. So first, what we need to do is go knight to, whoops, here, go knight to d5, attack that pawn. He goes, oh, that was a silly move. I'm just going to go c6, force you to waste time and move away. Knight moves away. But naturally, it's white who's laughing at black. He's saying, well, actually, you've made a massive weakness, and I'm going to start attacking that guy. He's like, oh, that was actually quite smart. Right? So, another important principle, every pawn move you make creates a weakness. Right? Remember that one. Put it on your wall, put it as your screensaver, wherever you need to put it. Every pawn move creates a weakness. Right? And it's always going to be the squares to the side of the pawn. So let's say this pawn's just moved. It's always going to be the two squares to the side of the pawn that have become weakened.
Right? I mean, this pawn's can't move backwards, so you can't take your move back.
Yeah.
You can't.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the problem. They're the only piece that can't move backwards. Everyone else can move backwards. And so if you move, like, let's say your knight to the wrong square, you can always kind of, fix the problem. It just takes some time to do so. But at least it's not like a permanent problem. The problem with the pawns is they can't move backwards. And so if you make a pawn weakness, it's there, it's going to stay, right? And that's, bit annoying, right? So now after knight c3, we have this target. Black tries to defend. Now white can double the rooks like this, rook to d2, rook to d1. And now white can make use of his open file to attack the backward pawn, right? Remember, this has now become backward because he can't be defended by another pawn. And therefore, white can actually make some progress here. Make sense? Hopefully.
Yeah, if you've got any questions, ask them in the chat, please, because we want you to really understand this. It's really important. I know attacking chess is really fun and really exciting, but if you can get better at positional chess, your results will improve dramatically. Yeah.
And actually, I have a story when I was kind of your age, I was not too bad. I was playing for the England team, kind of similar to you guys. And I was similar, I was quite good and renowned for being a good tactician. So I was good in tactical positions, sharp positions, that type of stuff. I once played another international master at this tournament in, I think it was in Birmingham. And I played against a guy called Lawrence Cooper, who's very well known on the chess scene. And because he's a very experienced player, he knew exactly what to do against me. He goes, this is kind of up and coming, sharp and dynamic junior player. And so he deliberately decided to make the game very strategical, very positional, and just slowly squeeze the life out of me, basically. And because he knew that I wouldn't be very good in those sort of areas of the game, right? He didn't want to go for any sharp tactical fights because he thought that then he risks losing against me. And so he made a very good practical decision. And of course, he then went on and beat me very easily, in that game, right? So this is why it's a very important topic, because if you guys, I know it might sound a bit boring, but if you guys kind of understand this as soon as possible, you'll notice that you can improve a lot, right? So that's why we're doing these this session.
I have a question, and I'm still a bit confused about what an outpost means. So if we can just quickly go over that again.
An outpost?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so basically we saw that this traditional outpost is, I put it all the way down here, is like this, right? So it's a square where one of your pieces is kind of in their half of the board and it can't be kind of kicked away. That's like the main definition of the outpost. So here we'd say the knight is on a d5 outpost, and that's really inconvenient for black because the white knight is in his half of the board, right? And the black has no way to kind of kick him, get rid of that knight, right? So it's going to be, very awkward for him for the rest of the game. But also the other definition of an outpost would be back in this example, where the knight can still go to a square in their half of the board, and for them to kick it away is seen as like a concession, right? That they could go c6, but by doing so, they create a massive weakness on d6 as a result, right?
Great, thank you. That's brilliant.
Makes sense. Okay.
Move on. Any more questions?
Now, actually, I should do this one first. So the next definition of an outpost is we've got to make sure that the piece that's going to be in their half of the board is defended by a pawn and usually a rook as well. That's also very important. Okay. So in this example, it looks like knight to d5 is the outpost, right? But actually black can just do maybe something like check, king moves away, and then just c6 and kicks your knight away, right? In which case we didn't really achieve anything. So knight d5 might look like a good move, but actually it's not. It's not actually the right sequence. Yeah, there's some tactical trick actually after knight d5 check that you can go knight c7, which technically wins material because it's like this fork idea, knight e6. So maybe I shouldn't quite go check. I should maybe go bishop d6 and then c6. But yeah, it's just to illustrate that this is not really an outpost. Black can kick you away, and when he kicks you away, it's very important that we didn't really make any weakness. Yeah, his pawn structure hasn't been weakened as a result of that c6 move. So therefore, we can say that knight d5 is actually not the outpost. Okay, so we're going to try find the outpost square. So you guys are going to have to get your detective hats on. Get ready. You're ready? You still awake?
Yeah, they look ready once I have their videos.
All right. So I'll give you 2 hints. The square you're looking for needs to be defended by a pawn. It also needs to be in their half of the board, and it needs to be defended by a rook. All right, let's start the timer. You got to tell me the square. Where should this knight be that would be classed as an outpost?
Yeah, and what strong players do is they think, where does my knight want to be? And they find a way of getting it there. So
yeah, exactly. So where is the outpost for white? C3-4. What's C3-4? That sounds like a Star Wars droid. C4, I see.
Got various answers coming through here, a few correct ones.
Remember, knight is with an N actually, because if you say K, then you make me think the king. So if you say like K B5, I think you want to move your king all the way to B5, and that's a bit confusing.
Yeah, capital N for knight, even though it does start with K. Yeah, lots of correct answers coming through. Aviana, that's right. Isla, that's right. Settled Oyster, that's right. Harrison, that's right. Sai, that's right. Charlie, that's right. Aaron, that's right.
Hang of it.
That's great. People are understanding.
Okay, all right. So let's have a look at some of the answers then. So we had kind of a knight b5. We had kind of c4. We had f5. We had b5, f5, e5, d4. Lots of squares that were given. Okay, and we're looking at this from white perspective. So I want to try find basically where this knight needs to be, and knight on d4 straight away is not very good, right? Because the pawn can just take you. That can't really be the outpost. D5 we already looked at, that they can just go move the bishop and kick you away. Knight b5, same thing. They can maybe just kick you away. So it doesn't really. And remember, when they kick you away, they didn't make any like backward pawn, any weakness there. And remember as well, I also gave you guys some hints. I said the square should be somewhere where a pawn and a rook would be defending. So the guys that said knight to f5 is correct, because that's the square where both a pawn and a rook are defending, right? Okay, so that's the first point. So this is what Sarah mentioned, that strong players are first kind of looking where their knight should be. So they kind of just go like this. They kind of pick the knight up and just imagine, if I could drop this guy anywhere on the board. I mean, it has to be a square that's obviously vacant, right? I can't just drop on the bishop's head. That'd be too convenient. And also, the other rule is when I drop it, it's going to be black's turn. I can't just go, right, I'm going to drop you there and then take the rook. This is a little surprise attack. It doesn't work like that either. I got to first drop the knight and assume it's going to be black's turn, right? So if I kind of imagine that, I think it's easy then to kind of work to see that maybe knight f5 looks like a good square to be on, which is defended by my pawn and the rook. And then once I've identified my kind of destination, I just need to find a safe route to do so. So then I can think, okay, go knight to e2, knight to g3, knight to f5. Yep, fantastic.
Yep, that. Well done.
To get into that outpost square. So that's what white does. Okay, let's say black just, I don't know, does something. Just moves pieces somewhere like this. We go knight to g3, and he decides to go back, knight to f5. Actually, I should probably move the bishop out.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah, move the bishop.
Get him out of the way, right? So we get to f5, and then, okay, it looks as though black can just kick us away. That is true, but that's not really, we don't really mind, because by doing so, he's now weakened the f6 pawn, right? So now we try to double our rooks, we actually have a much better chance of trying to win this guy, right? If we had done it in the starting position, back here, we tried to double the rooks, and Black just did something like this, we double the rooks, they're going to laugh at us because we're not attacking, really. The pawn, this is a brick wall. Pawn defended by another pawn is pretty hard to break through, right? So doing that wouldn't be such a good idea. Okay, so let's go through all this stuff, and that's that. Okay, so just to kind of test your guys' knowledge, I got these kind of two positions as well from the Sicilian and Scandinavian. So we'll start the Scandinavian one, and we kind of want to identify where, like long term, where is the outpost square for each side. So it's going to be a bit tricky. So remember, let's start off with white. So from white's perspective, where would you want a knight to be in, like in this example, right? It needs to be on an open file, open for white. It can be closed for black. As long as it's open for white, that's all that matters. And it needs to be in the black half of the board. All right. So where should the knight be? Someone said d7, but okay, d7, we'd have to have a rook on d3 in order to defend it, right? And having a rook on d3 looks a little bit strange. So not d7.
Yeah, once you know these like coordinates of the pieces as well, you'll get used to them in your games, and you'll have a really good feel for where to put your pieces.
Yeah. So here's our open file, right? So where should the knight be on this file, do you think? We can't put on e7. E6. Freddie might have something to say about that. E5. That looks quite good. E4. Technically, that's not on their half of the board, so it can't really be E4.
It's kind of giving it away now.
I know, but I'm nice. I'm very nice. Okay, so yeah, I think most of you're getting it now. Yeah, we want basically the white knight to be on E5. That's going to be the outpost square. Since if black ever plays F6, he's going to like create a big weakness on E7. And for black, it would be kind of the opposite. So black's open file is here, and so his outpost would be D4. Okay. So if you're playing black in these sort of structures, you want to put a knight there. If you're playing white, you want to put a knight there. Rooks on these files to support them. Okay. All right. Next one. We now have a Sicilian outpost. So I won't give you as many hints this time. White needs to be doing the same thing. So look for your open file. Look for a square that's in their half of the board. And then if you can, let's see if you can find a square that the white knight should be on. Okay, William and Charlie have already got it. It's good. Nice to see, not talking complete gibberish. All right, you're all getting actually. Wow, fantastic. Excellent. Yeah, so D5 is correct, right? It's the square where the rook can defend. It's supported by a pawn, and it's in the black half of the board. Remember, this is black's half of the board, right? So we kind of want to be in that region. Now, also I said earlier, is when we're dealing with the minor piece, we want it to be in the central region as well. So then if you kind of factor in that as well, then we can kind of narrow it down to these squares. And it can be in the center. Right? I can also narrow it down some more because a knight on the 7th rank might look quite appealing because it's quite far in their position, but actually the best outpost for a knight would be on the 6th rank, 5th or 6th ranks, okay? Because it's on the 7th rank, the problem is, let's say, imagine I have a knight on c7, I've lost 2 of the squares, right? There's no b9 and d9 that I can go to. So I've lost 2 of my squares I wanted to be on, and so my knight is not as powerful there, right? So the 6th rank is where the knight could be very strong. But in this example, yeah, d5 would be the best option for white. Okay, d4, yeah, d4 is not necessarily a bad square either, but it's not really like an outpost because it's in our half of the board. So the whole point of the outpost is to have a square in their half of the board. So it provides kind of a foundation, like a base for attack, right? Knight d4 is in our half of the board, and so it's not that scary for black to deal with. Okay, and then for black, it would be kind of the same. There's the open file, and they would want the knight then on c4 in our half of the board and in that central region, and then that should be, yeah.
I had a question about why not d4.
Why not d4?
In white's half of the board, so it's not threatening anything.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that all makes sense, right?
Yeah, people seem to understand it. Well done. Been listening really hard.
Fantastic.
So time for you to have a go with the countdown timer, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're getting onto the flank outpost. So we discussed the central outpost as being kind of in this region, right? These are kind of the central region of the board, and that's where you'd want to have your minor pieces. Now be careful, because some of you guys are already answering, and they're now dealing with a flank outpost. So remember what I said earlier, that who the sort of pieces want to be on the flank outpost. Okay, so I'll give you a timer. It's white to play. What do you think white should do in this position? Charlie's got it.
Mm-hmm.
Some of you kind of getting the right idea, but the wrong piece maybe. So remember what I said earlier. Flank outposts.
Yeah, we need to consider all our pieces, which pieces we actually want on that square. I'm not mentioning the square, but people putting the wrong piece on the right square.
Yeah, it's very 50-50 at the moment.
Yeah. Again, this is another idea. If you've seen it before, then it will really help your chess improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Like Brandon and I would do this position, we wouldn't need to think for very long at all to make our move. So if you're in time trouble, you can just play it instantly. So these ideas, it's really important that they're fixed in your brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wish I could have known all this stuff when I was your age. Would have been chess would have been so much easier for me, right?
Yes.
I had to learn the hard way. It took me years to understand these things, which is a bit of a shame. Okay, so yeah, basically it looks like everyone's got the right idea. We've identified the correct outpost square, which is fantastic. That's always the first task. And now we have to kind of, whoa, what's going on there?
Get it right.
Blame the mouse. So now we have to kind of understand which piece we're going to go there. So it's kind of 50-50. Some people saying knight g6, other people saying rook g6. So we have to decide which would be the better one. Now, remember at the start, I said that when we're dealing with a flank outpost, we want to use our heavy pieces, our major pieces, to go there instead. And the reason for that is if you just go in for a minor piece, which is your knights and bishops like this, it might look attractive because you're attacking the rook, but the rook just moves out of the way. You don't really have a follow-up, right? And also remember that your knight isn't so effective here because it's lost 2 of its potential squares. A knight wants to kind of always be controlling 8 squares, and at the moment it's only controlling 6, right? Because the 2 on the side are not available, right? So yeah, knight g6 isn't quite isn't as good. So rook g6 is therefore the best move, providing a kind of a platform so the other rook can come over and double on the open file, right? Remember, when we're dealing with open files, we want to be quite greedy. We want to have complete control of the open file. And we don't want to share, right? Imagine you're with your sister or something, and you've got nice chocolate cake. You don't want to share that with them. Well, you probably should. You should share, but just sometimes you might not want to. So, okay. So then, if black takes, we can just take back with actually either pawn is fine. But I quite like this one. Just take them the f pawn. Now we create a pass pawn, which is another very dangerous thing. And more importantly, we even create this nice outpost square for the knight in the central region, right? So when the knight goes there, he'll be controlling his 8 squares, and he'll be really happy.
Yeah, okay. Notice when that pawn moved from f5, it created the square for the knight. So this is very important. I think, like Brandon said, h takes is fine as well, but you're not giving your knight an extra square. We're always trying to improve our pieces in chess. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so this one is a little bit more complicated. So maybe we should potentially leave this as a puzzle for them to try afterwards.
Okay.
And let's try get onto some ranks. Okay. So now we've done kind of the open file. We've done the outpost, and now we want to just discuss kind of a little bit about the ranks, right? So the file's when you're going up the board like this, vertically, and a rank would be when you go across like this, right? Okay, so we've got a few kind of things we want to get through here. We might not be able to get through all of it, but that's okay. I think this all gets sent to you afterwards, so you can have a go yourselves. And what we want to do here, so we can see that white has managed to use his rook to get it, to penetrate into black's half of the board. So he's used the open file correctly, and now the rook is on the 7th rank, which is a very dangerous square for the rook to be, because that on that 7th rank he can attack everything, right? And so this is going to be, yeah, very, very problematic for black, right? And white has a very simple plan here. He wants to kind of march his king all the way up like this. Remember, in the end game stage, so when the queens have come off the board, the king should play an active role, right? He's not always a chicken. He's mostly a chicken, but not always, right? Eventually, when pieces come off the board, he decides, actually, I think it's time for me to be brave and go and, actually contribute to the fight. And he comes out and he can be a very powerful piece in the latter stage of the game. So remember to use him. Okay, this one is all about kind of a point of attack. So we can see that we've got these 2 rooks lined up on the 7th rank. That's always a very dangerous thing to have. And black is trying to hold on for dear life by using his own rook to defend that h7 square. So white goes about winning this by deflecting the rook away. He says, we don't want your rook there. Rook goes to h5. Then comes Gary, attacking the rook again. Rook goes, oh, I'll have that. So we lost a pawn, but that's not the end of the world. We can just simply move the king. Now the king's also helping out. And all of a sudden, the rook is being kicked away from the h file, right? There's no square he can go to without being captured. So he's basically forced to leave. Rook takes b3, and now this allows us to give a checkmate. So rook goes check, king comes here, a rook comes here, check, king to f8, and now hopefully you guys can all see the final move.
Tell me in the chat who can get it first in the chat. That's probably more their typing skills. Oh, accepted. Excellent.
Looks like Ritu got it first.
Oh,
fantastic.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Gonzalo, Finley. Yeah, everyone's getting it now.
Still getting one.
Yeah, so rook to h8 is the checkmate, right? Because the knight is defending the other rook, so the king can't take. Fantastic. Okay, so let's go to the next example. So again, we want to kind of make this point of attack, right? And the whole purpose of the point of attack is we try to say, we try to place a target in black's position on the 7th rank. So here's the 7th rank where rook's attacking. We try to identify which of these squares do you think our attack is going to be more successful on. So maybe we can do that as a question. I'll start a timer.
Yep, probably the last question of
so
concentrate hard.
Yeah, so you get this one right then. So which of those squares do you think is more likely that our attack would be successful on? Because if we identify the wrong point of attack, then maybe black's is going to queen his pawn, and then we might not win. So got to make sure you attack the right square.
You should always play chess with a plan rather than just making moves for the sake of it. You need to have a plan. So here, white will be thinking, right, how can I attack black and which square am I going to do that on?
Yeah.
Oh, I've got some variety between all three.
Yeah, Charlie found a nice combination. Really good.
Yeah, well done.
Seems like most of you have kind of the right idea as well. It's good to see. Yes, it seems like most of you guys are concentrating on these 2 squares as your point of attack, which is great. So let's start off with G7. Now, G7 is a kind of a hard one because that's the one where they're pretty well fortified, right? They're defending that square a few times. So let's say you go like knight to G3, trying to go to F5, A3, knight to F5, A2, queen E5. So you're now finally got enough pieces to threaten some checkmate idea. But the problem is now black is in time to get a queen and he can defend that square at the same time. So again, it's very important that when you're attacking that not only do you pick kind of the right target, the weakest square in the black position, but also you try to do it with a forcing sequence, which goes back to what Sarah said at the start of the session about always paying attention to checks and captures, right? So here white actually should start with knight to F6 check, right? Which now kind of forces black to take on F6, which reveals that the H7 square becomes a lot weaker because in initial position, it seems very difficult to attack this square. So yeah, knight F6 is a really good way to clear that pawn out of the way. And if black was to play king h8, then yeah, Charlie found this very nice idea. Queen takes h6 check. Now the pawn takes. Rook h7 is known as the Arabian checkmate. It's a very important checkmate pattern to remember. If they take like this instead, they take the knight, then we can keep giving checks, make sure everything comes with a check, and then that way we can slowly work our way over up to the h7 square and deliver the checkmate.
That's a nice
And black had no time to go and get his queen, which is always nice.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So it's 3 o'clock now, so that concludes the session. Thank you very much, Brandon. That was really, really instructive. And I know you've got more material there, so we'll send that out to everyone shortly, and then you can have a go. They're put as exercises using the octopus, so you can have a go at them and you can revise the ones that you didn't quite understand. So yeah, hopefully your positional chess is on the way up, because you're all good at attacking, but this is the hardest part of chess and deemed the most boring because it's not some fancy sacrifice. Although that last one was quite nice, and that's probably why everyone got so excited. Some of you are joining the session at 15:15. There's a different Zoom link for that. If not, thanks for joining this afternoon. Hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.